Another question that I had in the back of my head as I was reading the book is, why Atlanta? Why not Columbia? Why not New Orleans? Why not Charleston? Here's as you point out, here is a town, not even a town, a dot on the map that has no real purpose in being, unlike these other cities that have much longer histories, are more developed in other ways, and yet they are not going to become the cultural hub of the South in the way Atlanta has become. You look at the origins of Atlanta, so help us understand how it becomes what it becomes in opposition to those cities.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. I guess the key thing is to go back and you think about the creation of Atlanta compared to these other cities, the history of Atlanta. It's a new place. It doesn't exist as a city prior to 1847. The cities you've mentioned have a longer history, and they have more baggage. So I think that's a key difference. The ethos of Atlanta is linked to the fact that it's a new place, which ties to the fact that it was destroyed, and so it can start over again. The people that, the boosters, Atlanta boosters, are different. To me, that's very key in understanding the difference between Atlanta and some other urban places. Atlanta represents the future of southern urban places. If you look at the growth of urban spaces in the South after the Civil War, where's the growth taking place? Well, most of it is taking place in urban communities that are not as big as Atlanta, but are almost always located on railroads. So the railroad revolution, the market revolution that takes place after the Civil War generates, by far, the massive urbanization that's taking place. You know, cities like Atlanta, in a sense, that you think of a place like Durham, North Carolina. It doesn't exist before the Civil War, but why does it exist? Because a railroad line goes through there. Birmingham, Alabama is another example. You know, another place, great example, because it doesn't exist either. Why does it exist? Well, it's got coal mines, but it's also a major transportation center. So Richmond's still important, Charleston's still important, Columbia, certainly New Orleans.
Well, New Orleans, a very diverse place
yeah.
with quite a variety of history. That would make one think. It's got the river transportation. It's got a multicultural environment that would allow it to escape the sense of being in the South and
right.
the sense of being attached to the war. It's captured early relatively
right.
to the other cities. Why not New Orleans?
Well, New Orleans is not. I would put New Orleans over to the side in the sense of an example, because it is, you know, in many ways the most important urban center in the South up until well into the 20th century. And it's not. It has its own characteristics, and as you mentioned, you know, it's with the Mississippi River, all the things that are coming in the Gulf, the influences that are there. But Atlanta is going in a different direction than New Orleans. Clearly, it's not as multiracial, certainly, or multicultural as New Orleans was. But New Orleans doesn't just. New Orleans experiences occupation, but not destruction, to the extent that Atlanta does. You know, going back to that notion. So maybe the way to think about it is which cities experienced, you know, bombardment and destruction. That'd be certainly Columbia, Charleston, Richmond are best examples. And how did they respond to that destruction? Well, in all the other places, it seems to me, in none of those places did they embrace destruction and rebirth the way that Atlanta's booster class did. That seems to me to be a key difference. They're all places with more stratification, and the leadership class is a little more rigid too. Atlanta's a place that antebellum period had Northerners involved. Post-war period, it has you know, a number of prominent Northern carpetbaggers involved in the development. And as long as they make a buck, people are okay with it. And you don't see. I mean, Atlanta calls itself the Chicago of the South. You don't see Richmond calling themselves. That would be inconceivable. But that's a very good question, I think, you know, where Atlanta fits and what the distinctive nature of this place, distinctive in terms of compared to other cities, but very representative in terms of these other smaller places that are emerging.